Mr. Smylie, can you describe the depth of your injury that you sustained on March 19th?
It's just a spot went through my edge of the upper trap muscle right there, and kind of zipped right through. And like I said, oddly enough, I know it sounds weird, but I've never really felt it or had any trouble with it.
Did you require stitches?
No.
I think we heard an officer on one of the other cameras call it grazed. Is that a fair description?
I guess yes.
And Mr. Smylie, do you have any idea why Carly would want to shoot you?
No.
And we all heard Carly screaming when you walked from the garage into the kitchen on March 19th. How did Carly appear to you when you walked in?
Like I said, my initial thoughts were she was terrified, scared out of her mind. I still to this day don't think she ever even recognized me. Something was wrong there. I don't know what, but something was off.
And when you walked into the house, did Carly say anything to you?
No, just was screaming.
Did she say anything in response to your question? What's wrong?
No.
Is that like the Carly that you had known for the past 3 years?
No, not at all.
Did Carly ever have any interest in guns?
No, Ashley had wanted her to go shooting with us a time or two, and I had tried to, get her to shoot a couple different times. And I think Ashley or somebody might have taken pictures the time or two that she went, but that was it, and she never was interested in going when myself and Ashley went.
And in all the time that you've known Carly, would you describe her as callous?
No.
Would you describe her as calculating?
No, except with math.
Would you describe her as diabolical?
No.
How would you describe Carly?
She's just a sweet little girl ever since I've known her. And, even when we take her to the playground, instead of running around playing, a lot of times she would be pushing other kids on the swing and the little, I don't know what they're called, little roundabout things that kids get on and go in a circle. She'd be the one that'd be pushing groups of kids rather than her playing. She'd go find the younger ones to try to help take care of them, and she's just sweet.
And are you aware of any medication Carly had been placed on?
And I can't remember the names of which one was which, she had been placed on one by the therapist that they had started her on something.
And do you recall what that medication was for?
Whatever they thought it was, whether it was, I don't know, just generalized stress or depression, or I don't know what they were thinking it was.
Okay. And do you recall how many medications that she'd been on?
I know she was on one, and then approximately the week before the 19th, they swapped her to another one.
Okay. And with the first medication that Carly was on, did you notice any changes in her personality or demeanor?
No.
And with the second medication that Carly was on, did you notice any changes in her personality or demeanor?
No. She had only had a chance to be on it for a handful of days. I don't know exactly how many days, but yeah, she was just getting started on it.
And do you and Carly still have a relationship?
Yes, I think we're good.
Okay. And how frequently do you and Carly talk?
Just about every day now. I don't always get off of work in time to catch her on a phone call, but we text some back and forth over the app that's allowed, and we talk over the video chat thing that's allowed through the jail and on weekends. So we're good.
Prior to March 19th, had you ever been afraid of Carly?
No.
Are you afraid of Carly today?
No.
Prior to March 19th, had Ashley ever been afraid of Carly? Based on your observations and personal knowledge, had Ashley ever appeared to be afraid of Carly?
Objection, Your Honor, again, calls for speculation.
Your Honor, he can say what he observed.
Y'all argue in front of the jury. Y'all approach. All right. The objection is going to be overruled. You can answer the question based on your observation and personal knowledge. Did Ashley appear to be afraid of Carly?
No, not at all.
And you testified on direct that you had retained your own attorney after the investigation of this matter got started. And you said that that was because you had been concerned or felt worried that you were going to be charged with a crime?
Yes, the cops had insinuated tampering with evidence. They held my license for several days, wouldn't bring it back. I kind of think it now that they were maybe trying to keep me
Objection, Your
around.
Honor, calls for speculation.
That's sustained. You can testify to what you observe, but you can't testify to what you think other people do, okay?
Okay. And then I went and got a lawyer from there.
Okay. And why would you have tried to hide evidence that you were telling law enforcement about?
I have no idea. I was trying to find anything I could that might help out and figure out what or why.
Was law enforcement aware that there was a garage camera on March 19th?
I don't believe so. They were all around out there apparently looking at stuff. I don't know, 5 or 6 of them, and they never saw the camera or never bothered to mess with it, more than likely.
Had any members of law enforcement asked you about any cameras?
No, not that I recall.
Okay. And you spoke on direct examination about them turning the house back over to you. About how long did law enforcement have your house under investigation on March 19th?
I had been down to the ER and back a couple hours, 2.5 hours roughly maybe, because it had gotten dark by the time I got back there.
And how many times after March 19th did law enforcement issue search warrants to come back out?
2 more times.
Okay. And during those 2 other times, now making 3 times that law enforcement investigated your house, did anyone find the camera in the fridge?
No, they did not.
Okay. And they didn't ask about any cameras in the garage?
No.
Okay. No. So you were very forthcoming with this evidence?
Yes.
And you also had your attorney file a motion to rescind the no contact order between you and Carly, correct?
Yes.
Had you asked that that be done beforehand?
Yes, I had tried to get my first attorney to get some of that in motion, and I don't know what happened there. It kind of fell through.
And has anyone else made you feel intimidated during the course of this investigation?
I was told by the DA's office that I couldn't contact anyone else, like y'all that were working with her about anything, couldn't speak with anyone else. And then
You were told you...
Objection, Your Honor, Gregg.
Sure. So, can you proceed?
So, it's understandable that you would be a little guarded
yes,
and that this has been a long, ongoing investigation, and it's hard to talk about this stuff emotionally.
yes, at times worse than others.
Yeah. And that you have been interviewed about this previously.
Yes,
So, you're having to go back over the same stuff repeatedly.
yes,
And it's hard to testify. It's nerve-wracking.
it is.
And this is being televised and broadcast, and there's been a lot of scrutiny, so it's understandable that you would be guarded and nervous while testifying.
Correct.
Thank you for court's indulgence.
Redirect examination.
Keith, how many phones did you know of that Carly had?
I just knew of the one that we had gotten for her.
And so if law enforcement had 2 phones they recovered belonging to Carly from the scene, that would in fact be more phones than you knew about, right?
Yes.
Do you think that if someone shoots at me unprovoked, that that's a violent offense?
I guess so. It really depends on the circumstances.
Again, unprovoked, I'm walking into this courtroom, and out of nowhere, this gentleman closest to the door, as soon as I open it, pulls out a gun and fires it at me. Is that a violent offense?
It could be. Depends on the circumstances.
You said that Carly, you never saw her get mad or yell?
I have never seen Carly just angry or anything.
Never.
No, ma'am. She's always been just a happy little girl.
Was she a happy little girl when we just heard the video when she was firing a gun at you?
Like I said, I've never seen anybody like that, even in movies. She was not herself, and like I said, I do not believe she even recognized me. She was terrified.
And Heath, I believe on direct, when I asked you about medications, you actually didn't handle Carly's prescriptions or medications, right?
No, Ashley was making sure she was taking them.
I want to talk to you, Mr. Smylie. You said that law enforcement came over a couple times and they didn't find these cameras. Did Miss Todd and Mr. Camp come over to your house at some point?
Yes, they did.
And when was that?
I think it was after the second police search.
And at any point, did they also conduct a search of your house?
They came through and wanted to take pictures and get the layout of the house.
Did they take anything from the house?
I think they took a couple pieces of her artwork and a couple things like that, but I'm not certain at this time.
And you don't know as to what they did with those, do you?
I do not.
Did they ever find the camera in the refrigerator?
No.
Court's indulgence. There are no further questions.
May this witness be finally excused by the state.
We'd ask that he's subject to recall.
Okay. Mr. Smylie, I'm going to ask you to stand down, but you're going to need to leave the courtroom and not discuss your testimony with anybody. You're not free to be in the courtroom just yet.
Okay.
All right. Stay.
Where within Rankin County do you work, Cliff?
In the Rankin County Coroner's Office.
Okay. And what specifically is your title at the coroner's office?
Chief Deputy Coroner.
How long have you worked there at the coroner's office, Cliff?
Been there about 12 and a half years.
Okay. What year did you start?
2011.
And as the chief deputy coroner, what are some of your job duties and responsibilities there at the coroner's office?
So essentially we are death investigators. We respond to any number of deaths that fall under our jurisdiction.
Okay. Prior to working at the coroner's office, did you work anywhere else?
Yes, I've been in the death care industry since 2006 as a licensed mortician.
Okay. And what kind of training did you go through to become a licensed mortician?
So for the mortician, we have an associate's degree in applied sciences, specifically for mortuary science.
And before coming to the coroner's office in 2011, between 2006 and 2011, where else did you work during those times?
I started out working at Ottenlee Funeral Home and then subsequently at mortuary services after that.
Okay. And just kind of, not to get graphic or anything like that, but on a day-to-day basis, what did your job responsibilities include?
So we would respond to scenes of death, hospitals, residents. We would take decedents into our care and then provide the services that the family wanted depending on their desires.
And so once you came to the coroner's office in 2011, what kind of training or education did you have to go through?
So we go through a 40-hour initial training that covers the various degrees and topics that we may encounter on a day-to-day basis. Death investigation, family notifications, and then we do continuing education on a yearly basis.
And how much continuing education is required of someone in the coroner's office?
So we're on 24 hours in a calendar year.
And just in general, what kind of topics do you typically, what kind of classes do you take as part of your continuing education?
It could be any manner of things that kind of fall under the jurisdiction of death investigation, scene recovery, family discussions, just all manners that fall under that jurisdiction.
As part of your training and education, do you sometimes attend and observe autopsies at the state crime lab?
Yes, we do.
How many would you say that you've attended or observed since working at the coroner's office?
In my time total, I would say roughly 10 to 15.
And speaking of the state medical examiner's office, tell the ladies and gentlemen how the coroner's office works with the state medical examiner's office, or if y'all do work with the state medical examiner's office.
We do. So under the state medical examiner's office, there are 83 coroners, one for each county and one additional for the Choctaw Reservation. We're basically the eyes and the ears of the medical examiner's office because they're not able to, of course, go out to each individual death per county. So we're kind of their representatives on a day-to-day basis, and we report to them findings.
Since starting at the coroner's office in 2011, approximately how many calls would you say you've been on Cliff?
Estimated, I would say at least into the thousands, based off of my yearly calls that we work.
And again, just kind of generally speaking, why would the coroner's office be called to a scene?
So again, for death investigation, usually anything that falls under our jurisdiction, natural deaths and unnatural deaths.
And whenever you say unnatural deaths, what do you mean by that?
Any death that is not attributable to a disease, natural disease process, that can range from suicides, homicides, accidental deaths.
And so, just again, speaking generally, not about this case in particular, whenever you show up to a scene or respond to a call, kind of walk us through what your procedure is.
So normally we would determine whether or not this was a natural death or not. You know, like I said, we cover a lot of different types of cases. Of course, we want to make sure that the scene itself is preserved so that we have a very accurate description of how the death occurred. Then we would talk to any law enforcement agencies and proceed accordingly.
And now kind of turning to March 19th of this year, 2024, were you employed at the coroner's office at that time?
Yes.
As a chief deputy
Yes.
coroner? Okay. Do you remember receiving a call out to 214 Ashton Way?
I do.
Okay, and just by way of brief description, tell us where that's located.
It's in the Adeline subdivision, I believe, off Grants Ferry Road.
Okay. Old Fannin.
Oh, Fannin, yeah.
And did you respond to that address?
I did.
Okay. And again, walk us through from the time that you got the call out to when you got on scene, what you did.
Okay, so when we arrived on scene, we were informed that this death was attributed to a gunshot wound. So that let us know that when we arrived on scene to meet with investigators and law enforcement just to make sure that the scene was secure and safe for us to enter into. Once that was established, we made entry into the house. Walking into the living room, we went to the left. There were some bedrooms that were located off the living room. That time we found Miss Smylie. She was laying on her back in a supine position, and it appears as though she had suffered gunshot wounds.
Okay. Did you conduct an initial investigation of your own to determine anything at that time?
Yes, we wanted to make sure again that scene preservation was of the utmost importance. So we talked to the law enforcement, made sure that again it was okay for us to enter into the scene, and that's when we noticed the room that she was in and kind of the surrounding environment.
And did you look at Miss Smylie? Did you observe anything about her body?
Yes, upon initial inspection, we did see that she did have 2 gunshot wounds at the time. We always want to make sure that we present the medical examiner with the most accurate visual possible. So, we kind of document what we're looking at, and that's what we initially found were 2 gunshot wounds.
Okay. So once you did your initial investigation, then what did you do after that?
So at that time, we placed Miss Smylie into a white sheet that's used to collect any artifact that may be displaced during the transportation process. And then we recovered her from the scene until we took her to the medical examiner's office.
Okay. And then did you, as part of your investigation, conduct any further investigation into Miss Smylie's case?
At that time, we were waiting on law enforcement and their reports to come in, and then the medical examiner's office would perform the autopsy.
Okay. And after the medical examiner's office performed the autopsy, did you learn anything else about how many gunshot wounds Miss Smylie had received?
Yes.
Approach.
Hold on. Give him the report. Give him the report. Yes, sir. You can approach.
I just was going to give him the document. Thank you.
That's all right.
Mr. Dunlap, you were just handed a document there. Do you recognize that document?
I do.
And what is that?
This is our case report that we fill out on every death that we work.
Okay. And it appears as though it's 3 pages. Is that what you have?
Correct.
Okay. If you turn to the last page there's a what says investigator narrative. You see that?
I do.
Did you write that?
I did.
Okay. And when would you have written that?
That would have been the night of the incident.
Okay. And if you, in this case, were you able to make a determination as to cause and manner of death?
Yes.
Okay.
Once the medical examiner's office ruled, yes.
Okay. If you look on page 2 or anywhere in this report, is that reflected in this report?
Yes.
Okay. And what were you able to determine as the cause of death?
Cause of death was 3 gunshot wounds to the head.
And what about the manner of death?
Manner of death was homicide.
Court's indulgence.
Cross-examination. Mr. Camp, you need the exhibit for cross.
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you please give it to Baylor? Baylor, give it to him.
I have a copy, Your Honor.
You do have, okay, just want to make sure. I knew, I took your only copy, I apologize.
Okay, Cliff, and I just wanted to make sure I understand everything. This is what you call your case report, is what you have in front of you, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, is that the only documents that is generated by your office?
As far as our investigative report, it is. We do initiate the death certificate, of course, for the funeral home at the appropriate time.
Okay, and to, I guess, initiate the death report and this case report, you look at other documents, is what I'm understanding, is that correct?
As far as,
Well, you said you had talked to the medical examiner's office.
right, that was once the autopsy report was completed and they initiated the cause and manner of death.
Okay, once they do okay, so you're getting information from the autopsy.
Correct.
Okay, and so that's actually that's telling you what the matter of death is, or
Correct.
manner of death is.
Correct.
Okay, it's not anything you do.
Correct.
Okay, so you're just getting, it's sort of secondhand information that you get from them, and then you put on a piece of paper, and then you turn it in.
Once they rule on the cause of death, yes, sir.
Okay. In here, I was looking on the last page, because you said there were, and I guess this would be a case in point. On the last page, it has your investigator narrative, and that would be your narrative.
Correct.
Okay. And it talks about 2 gunshots. Okay. But then you got more information, I guess, after you did your narrative.
Right. Correct.
Okay. And you didn't go back and edit or change, or when I say change it, you didn't make a notation that upon getting the autopsy information back, there's actually 3 gunshots or anything like that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Would you normally make, because it looks like on the first page, did you say, or at some point you do say there's 3 gunshots, is that correct?
In the case, or the cause of death, once it was ruled that it was changed to that.
Okay. But you didn't change the narrative.
Correct.
And you didn't, in your narrative, you didn't say anything about, once you get the information, you're now, compiling the report, and this is what we're doing, is that correct?
Right. We have a separate report from the medical examiner's office.
And so is this one, well, I guess you wouldn't do this case report, or you wouldn't finish it until you got the autopsy done.
Correct.
Okay. No further questions, Charlie.
Redirect.
Cliff, do you know whenever you said you sat through some autopsies, is that correct?
Correct.
Whenever the medical examiner gets someone into the crime lab, do they clean that person up?
What they do initially is they will do x-rays before anything is done to the decedent. Yes.
Do they clean the person up or in any manner?
During the course of the autopsy, they do.
Okay. Is the based off what you know personally, is the medical examiner's office, can they then do their investigation into the decedent at that time as well?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And you said earlier that the coroner's office is the eyes and the ears in Rankin County. Is that correct?
Correct.
And again, just to be clear, as reflected in your report that's in evidence, what were you able to determine was the cause and manner of death?
The gunshot wounds.
Okay, and what,
Yes, sir.
Cliff, through the laws of the state, are you familiar with the laws of the state as they affect the coroner's office?
Yes.
Okay, and does your office make a determination as to cause and manner of death through your normal job duties and responsibilities?
In cases that we rule on, yes.
Okay. No further questions, Your Honor.
May this witness be finally excused by the state?
Yes, sir.
By the defense?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you're free to step down. We'll be in recess till 12:30. but as soon as they're done, we'll get started back. Anything further from the state before we recess? Yes, sir. From the defense.
We have one issue that we would like to take up if we could.
Sure. Go on and come to the podium.
Your Honor, there was a mental evaluation that was done by Dr. Pickett, in that we had made a request to get the recording, and we had sent both an email to the court, and we filed a motion because we weren't sure exactly what we need to do to ask for it. Dr. Pickett had sent us a response when we had requested his recording. He said that he'd be happy to give it to us, but we have to file a subpoena or something to that effect. And that's why we filed the motion.
Do you have an order for me to sign or a subpoena or anything?
Yes, Your Honor, I can get that. That's why if the court says it's okay, we will get you an order, Your Honor.
Yeah, I mean, I'll hear from the state in response, but short orders, yes, but I'm not taking the order.
Yes, we'll take care of that, no problem, Your Honor.
Does the state have a response for the record?
Your Honor, the motion doesn't actually state any reasoning for wanting the recordings other than the fact that in the evaluation report, Dr. Pickett made numerous allegations concerning one of the defendant's attorneys. It doesn't appear that they want these recordings for anything to do with the defendant's mental state at the time, but rather about something to do with an attorney. So we don't really know what the purpose of those would be. So of course we can't state whether we would agree or not agree to the production. But also it should be noted that their expert did not provide us, nor did he have any recordings of his evaluations.
Anything further? Any reply?
Your Honor, I don't believe there was a recording by Dr. Just for clarification, there were two other individuals who had done reports. Neither one of those individuals did recordings on this matter. The issue was in his report, it references interactions between the defendant, the attorney, and part of Dr. Pickett's evaluation was based upon those interactions, and it specifically says it in his report, and they know what we are referring to. So that's what the basis of it was, Your Honor.
The court will grant any order or subpoena that Dr. Pickett believes that he requires for you to turn it over. However, as I said, I don't type anybody's orders, so I don't have an order in front of me. As soon as I get the order, I'll be happy to sign it. I'll ask the state to go ahead and let Dr. Pickett know that I have said I'm going to order him to turn it over. So I'd ask that he turn it over post haste, but I can understand the doctor wanting some document from the court saying he has to turn it over too. But motion granted, give me an order, give me a subpoena. All right?
Yes, Your
Over the objection of the state.
And we will notify Dr. Pickett. When I spoke with him about whether or not he could produce that, he did have concerns about being able to email such a large file. So that if the defense could help provide him with some way for them to actually transfer that file. Otherwise, it could not be until if and when he's brought here into town for hearing testimony. I believe Dropbox would allow.
Okay, well, Dr. Pickett's not going to set up the Dropbox. This is what I'm going to do. I'll sign the order saying he's to turn it over. But logistics are y'all's end, okay? The court is not going to get involved with typing the state's orders. I don't type the defendant's orders, and I don't get involved with the state or the defendant, how y'all want it produced. That's y'all's problem. So, granted, give me an order. I'm asking the state to let Dr. Pickett know that I'm granting the order. How he produces it's none of my concern, okay?
Thank you.
All right, best of luck to both sides. We'll be in recess at 12:30.
And Tyler, where are you employed?
I work for the Rankin County Sheriff's Office.
And what is your role with the Rankin County Sheriff's Department?
I'm an investigator in the Criminal Investigator Division.
And tell us what that means.
Essentially, our division incidents, we investigate calls for service, initial reports that are taken by the patrol division, or walk-in reports that are made whenever citizens come into the sheriff's office to report criminal activity, fraud, theft, things along those lines.
How long have you been in law enforcement?
14 and a half years.
And has all that been spent at the Rankin County Sheriff's Department?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Tell us about where all you've been.
So I started off at the Madison Police Department in 2010. After that, I worked for the Madison County Sheriff's Office, the Pearl Police Department. I was an investigator in Pearl Went to Flowwood not long after that, was a detective over there, started in internal affairs over there, and I went to go work for the Mississippi Attorney General's office in the Public Integrity Division, and did some good work there. And not long ago, the sheriff and the undersheriff asked if I would be willing to come to the sheriff's office and kind of bolster that particular division, that particular program here. And so I maintain a criminal caseload and a compliance caseload.
I want to take a step back. Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen kind of what training is required to become a law enforcement officer first?
Well, you have to complete the basic police officers course. There are multiple taught in the state of Mississippi. You can go through the Tupelo Police Academy. They have their own. The Jackson Police Academy has their own. The Southern Regional Public Safety Institute, which is the one that I went to, was at one point in time combined with the Harrison County Law Enforcement Training Academy because it had essentially been demolished during Katrina. And so it was relocated to Camp Shelby, Mississippi. And Harrison County has since kind of restarted their own. You can go to the Mississippi Law Enforcement Training Academy right over here in Pearl, and then of course there's the Mississippi Highway Patrol Academy. They kind of put on their own, but it's a state accredited course that if a trooper decides that he no longer wishes to be a member of the Highway Patrol, he can always use that as a lateral into a sheriff's office, police department, under the state agency.
And particularly, I'm interested in what you did. So you told us that you went to which academy?
Yes, ma'am. So I started off at the Southern Regional Public Safety Institute, like I said. I've had a lot of training over the years. Initially, I had a lot of training related to the patrol side of law enforcement, so to speak. You know, uniformed officers riding around in a marked patrol car, patrolling neighborhoods, enforcing traffic laws, and things along those lines. A lot of that particular type of training was impaired driving enforcement, counter drug related stuff, some drug investigations as far as trafficking and things along those lines. The most recently, I guess more recently, I had some internal affairs training. I'm a certified polygraph examiner with the state of Mississippi. I'm a certified criminal investigator. The state of Mississippi actually has a program that criminal investigators can go through. It's taught out at the Mississippi Law Enforcement Training Academy in Pearl. And it's essentially I think it's 320 classroom hours, and then there is the difference, I think it's 80 hours of hands-on instruction. Essentially, you're kind of going out and you're taking latent fingerprints off objects, and you're rolling car tires to get tire impressions. You're taking dental stone, and you're taking all of the investigative resources that you need to in order to take tire wear impressions and footwear impressions. You're doing digital evidence extractions from phones, and you're going through your draft and search warrants. You're learning about death investigations. You're learning about kind of what particular changes that the body goes through as we pass away, and you're going through different things that you can look for in order to determine, okay, we have a crime here, or we don't have a crime here. And so that was definitely one course that I've been through here lately, but I've had some other training, you know, counterterrorism and SWAT, special response team stuff, and you know, tactics and things along those lines. But that's, in a nutshell, that's generally it.
In the training that you've had and in your 14 years in law enforcement experience, have you had the opportunity to investigate or be on the scene of murders?
Yes, ma'am.
And was that prior to March 19th of 2024?
Correct.
I want to ask you specifically about the Rankin County Sheriff's Department. So we heard from Deputy Lewis earlier about the fact that he wears a body cam when he's dealing with the public.
Correct.
What is the policy for investigators and body cams back in March of 24?
The investigators in my division did not have body cameras in March of 2024.
What about as we sit here today? Do y'all have them now?
We are starting to trickle them in, and by trickle, what I mean is that the criminal investigators that I work alongside with, and I guess I should try and explain this. So the criminal investigator division not only houses the criminal investigators, people that investigate, you know, the theft and the violent crimes and the fraud and all of those things, but it also houses our drug investigators. We have prescription fraud investigators that essentially work on pharmaceutical diversion, investigators that investigate street drug related crimes, you know, the sale of fentanyl and the sale of marijuana and the sale of methamphetamines and things along those lines. But we also have our interdiction investigators, guys that are essentially working on drug trafficking organizations and things like that. So those narcotics investigators is kind of the loose term for those different identities of investigators. Those have their body cameras they all have them now. So before, the street drug investigators and the pharmaceutical diversion investigators did not have them. They do now. And so Our interdiction guys have them, the narcotics guys have them, but we are still kind of acquiring them piece by piece as we are able, as the sheriff's office is able to obtain the resources either through budget appropriation or grant funding in order to continue to buy body cameras for our division.
Investigator Burnell, I want to take you back to March the 19th of 2024, were you in fact working at the Sheriff's Department at that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen if you worked a call at 214 Ashton Way that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Walk us through your first involvement with that call that was made out to 911.
So we were going back to that date. We were actually in trial that week, working on another case with I believe it was Mr. Smith was involved in that one as well. But I had left the courthouse, went to my office, and essentially obtained my belongings, which is essentially just a backpack that I towed all my stuff in. But acquired that, got in my vehicle, and started heading to my residence. And our police radio is on, and the volume up, and I overhear our 911 dispatcher asking that that the units that work to the north end of our county, which is essentially like anything north of I-20 or Highway 80, asking for the north units to be en route to 214 Ashton Way. And this was a female dispatcher, that a disturbance had taken place and there was a possible shooting involved. So, of course, knowing that our division will eventually be involved in that particular incident, I activated my emergency equipment and drove to the scene, and was the first investigator there. And basically, once I got there, I noticed that deputies Hunter Lewis and Dustin Smith had already arrived. They're assigned to the patrol division, and medical personnel had also arrived on scene already.
And the medical personnel, is that separate from the Sheriff's Department?
That's correct. So in the county, especially around the reservoir area, we tap into the fire protection for the cities very, very minutely, but we also have the reservoir fire department, which responds to a lot of the fire and emergency related medical incidents in the unincorporated part of the county.
On this particular day, what information had you been provided kind of before you walk into, because we've actually seen some body cam footage where you walk up to the scene. At that point, what did you know had happened?
So I walk up to the scene. Pafford is loading a white male who was later identified as Heath Smylie. Our dispatcher had stated that his daughter had shot him, killed his wife, and then fled, which is the radio traffic that I'm hearing on the radio prior to getting to the scene. And so I have real general information and not really specific details. So I go to Deputy Lewis, I go to Hunter, and simply ask him what he's got. And then he begins to fill me in on the specific details related to kind of why we're there, what has transpired, what information he's been able to get from Mr. Smylie, anything along those lines.
Do you recall around what time you got the call or that you went out to the house?
It was shortly after 5 o'clock, 5:06, 5:07, somewhere around in there.
Nighttime?
Yes, ma'am. Afternoon, right. I'm sorry.
When you arrived on the scene, where was Carly Gregg?
She was not there.
Did law enforcement know where she was at that time?
No, ma'am.
When you go into the house, kind of walk us through what you're doing and what you're assessing at that time.
So and this will be kind of hitting the fast forward button a little bit. So there are a couple of things that transpire after I make contact with Hunter. I provide him some information in order to get an incident log started, like a crime scene log, crime scene integrity sheet, what have you, and essentially get my camera. And then our investigators I can hear them on the radio coming en route, so to speak, and basically informing our dispatcher that they're en route to the scene. And as that is beginning to happen, I simply take my camera, get some gloves, and because gloves are, regardless of whether or not people think about it, gloves are they're important. They're a big thing when it comes to crime scenes. We have touch DNA in our skin. Believe it or not, we skin cells come off of our hands, regardless of whether or not we know it, and we leave those, we transfer those on different surfaces and things along those lines. And so gloves are an important thing when it comes to crime scenes. And so I obtained a pair of gloves, got my camera, and then essentially begin to try and photograph the residents. Start on the outside, and then work from the outside in, and basically we're just trying to document and preserve the house the way it is, as we find it, so to speak.
Investigator Burnell, I want to take a step back. You mentioned something about setting up a crime scene log. Can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen what that means and why that's important?
So when I got there, the Deputy Lewis had facilitated the putting up of the tape, the cliche, the crime scene tape that that most people see on television, stuff like that. Well, what you may not see is a crime scene log. So it's essentially a document, a landscaped piece of paper that's got a bunch of lines on it. It's got a name, a place for an agency, the time in, time out, and purpose for scene on some of them. It's essentially to document the comings and goings of everybody on that particular scene, whether or not you're a law enforcement officer, you're a coroner, you are a medical member of the medical personnel, whether or not you're fire, paramedic, so on and so forth.
During the time that you have a crime scene taped off and you're doing this log, is anyone other than first responders and law enforcement, and I'm including the coroner in that, allowed in that crime scene?
No, ma'am.
I want to talk to you. You talked about gloves, and I know that when we watched that video, Deputy Lewis did not have gloves on
Correct.
when he first went to the house. I mean, y'all don't drive around in your patrol car with gloves on, right?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
And so when you were on patrol, I mean, initially when you come out to a shooting call, what is your main goal at that point?
Irrespective of any type of call, our first priority when it comes to law enforcement is the preservation of life. If I leave today and God forbid come upon some scene or something like that where somebody is in dire need of emergency medical help, I'm not going back to get my gloves. Like you begin to administer first aid regardless of that, and then we'll deal with the consequences and repercussions after the fact. Like we have to be able to preserve life. That is our number one priority, and then everything else falls secondary and tertiary and so on and so forth to that.
I want to talk a little bit more in a minute about your processing of the scene, but I also want to talk about, I mean, when you arrived there, what did you learn? You said you later learned that Heath Smylie was the man on the front porch.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
What was his condition?
He had sustained a single gunshot wound, I believe. So it would be his right and our left shoulder had a through and through gunshot wound to the left upper torso. I guess we can say it that way.
And what about was there someone else in the home when you went there?
There were no other living people inside the home whenever I got there. The body of Ashley Smylie was found in a room that was later determined to be controlled and normally occupied by Carly Madison Gregg.
In the course of your investigation, did you prepare a layout of the Smylie household?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
May I approach witness Sharon? I've handed you a piece of paper. Could you take a look at that and tell me what that is?
So it's a very general non-scale layout of the Smylie home, Smylie residence at 214 Ashton Way.
And is this a document that you prepared?
Correct.
And what were you using this document for?
Essentially, we were using it for courtroom purposes. I mean, at the end of the day, like I know what the house looks like. You all don't know what the house looks like. You're not there. I can give you pictures of the best pictures in the world of a crime scene, but at the end of the day, if you can't look at it visually and kind of see how I move from room to room taking those photographs and essentially kind of see the layout of the home, whenever you're hearing 911 calls or you're hearing us talk about different things on the scene or you're hearing us discuss search warrants or something like that during the testimony phase, where you won't really be able to know where we are or where my mind is as I recollect that.
And is that a true and accurate copy of the layout that you prepared in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, we'd ask that this be marked as state's next exhibit. I believe it's 11.
That's 11 on premises.
Investigator Burnell, you talked about that you go through and your initial thing that you do on the scene, besides of course assessing where the two people are, is taking photographs, documenting that evidence. You said you documented the outside of the home?
Correct.
Did you also document any telephones in that house?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell us about that.
So essentially when I finish taking my exterior pictures, move up to the threshold of the house, which I'm gonna see if I can spin around a little bit. So essentially I'm finishing up. This is north. This is generally going to be east. That's generally west, and of course this is generally south. So we make get to the threshold of the house, and essentially start taking pictures in almost a 360 pattern. Okay, so we're going to take as many photographs overlapping each frame as we go, and then until we cover all of this room. Go inside, close the door, and then grab the area that we couldn't get because the door is open, of course, and then we're going to photograph all of that too. And that's kind of systematically going through and trying to clear or document or photograph each room in the house.
I want to, may I approach the witness room? I'll give you 2 photos.
Yes,
Could
ma'am.
you identify, or could you look at those and tell me what's in those photographs?
So essentially your first shot as an investigator when you get on scene needs to be of the front of the house. We typically like to have the mailbox in it, or at least some markings on the front of the house. That way it's readily identifiable as, well, this was 214 Ashton Way, and not 215, 213, 221 or anything along those lines. I know that all these photographs are from 214 Ashton Way from this photograph until the last one. So the next photograph, whenever we entered in through that threshold I told you about a second ago from the living room, there is a let's call it a small entertainment center. It's about knee high. It's wooden. It's about the same color as this banister in front of you all, and it essentially has 2 phones on it. So this black phone and this white phone. So the white phone was later determined to be the property of Ashley Smylie, and the black phone over here on the left was later determined to be the phone of belonging to Carly Madison Gregg.
Investigator Brunel, do those appear to be true and accurate copies of 2 of the photographs that you took on that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, we'd ask that these be moved into evidence as the state's next exhibit.
Any objection? No objection. Front of the house will be marked as 12, the other one will be marked as 13.
Permission to approach the witness room?
Yes.
If you would take a look at those and just let me know when you finish looking at them.
Okay, ma'am.
Did those appear to also be a true and accurate copy of some of the pictures that you took from the crime scene that day?
Yes, ma'am.
Are those particular pictures, I'm not asking you to describe them to the jury yet, but
Yes,
could
ma'am.
you tell me generally what are those photographs? What are they of?
So the first one on top is a nylon single strap retention holster that was located on the bed in the master bedroom, which was believed to have been occupied and controlled by Heath Smylie and Ashley Smylie. The second photograph is the countertop in the kitchen of the residence that basically depicts some clothing, a scarf, and a winter wear jacket, a .357 silver revolver handgun, and then that is I guess a large scale, a wide frame photo, and then the next one is a medium frame photo showing the same handgun, and then the next photograph is a serial number image of the same handgun I just described to you. Now you can see it's a Taurus .357 Magnum handgun revolver. The last photograph are 6 cartridges and 1 live .38 special round that were recovered from that particular silver revolver.
Are those photographs that were taken from the scene on March the 19th, 2024?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that
Yes,
a true and accurate copy of those photographs?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, we'd ask that those be marked as state's next exhibit.
Any objection? No objection. First one with the holster will be S14. Second one.
An investigator at the Rankin County Sheriff's Department.
Investigator Cotton, how long have you been with the Rankin County Sheriff's Department?
I started in April of 2015.
And tell us kind of work your way through, because did you start in dispatch?
The jail.
The jail.
Yes, ma'am. And I went to the academy in January of 2017.
And so you graduated from Law Enforcement Academy in 17, and then were you with the Sheriff's Department as a road deputy at that point?
I was a school resource officer at the beginning, and then in December of 2017, I transferred to patrol.
On March the 19th of 2024, what role were you in with the Rankin County Sheriff's Department?
I was working in investigations.
Did you have the opportunity to be called out to 314 Ashton Way?
214, actually.
214.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. And where is that?
It's over there in Farmington Station. over there off of Farmington Boulevard out in Brandon, Mississippi.
And what was your reason for going out to that location?
The sheriff's department received a call from a male that has stated that he had been shot by his stepdaughter and that his wife was found deceased inside the residence.
And what was your role when you arrived on the scene at that location?
When we initially got there, I, along with other parties on scene, made sure the residence was safe. Other investigators had made it on scene prior to my arrival and began taking pictures. While I was on scene, it was noted that a friend of the suspect or the defendant had been located in the area. I went outside and interviewed him whenever he was outside the residence.
And we heard from testimony from him yesterday. What, if anything, did you do after you spoke to the male friend that came that day?
His mother was there, explained to her that we would need his phone in order to make a forensic copy of the phone, due to him admitting that he had communicated with the defendant through his cellular device. Around the time that he was being interviewed, and I'm not sure the exact time, but it was informed that Miss Gregg was taken into custody. At that time, it was verified where to take her, whether or not the jail or to the youth detention center due to her age. It was decided to take her to the youth detention center out in Pelahatchie.
While on the scene, did you have interaction with Miss Gregg?
If I did, it was very brief. I don't recall.
Did you have an opportunity at the sheriff's department to do any sort of testing on Miss Gregg?
I did not. One of the other investigators, whenever she was arrested at the scene, was able to test her for gunshot residue and did initial photographs of her person.
Did anybody take any buccal swabs of Miss Gregg?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware of when that happened?
It was approximately a week later. I obtained a search warrant for buccal swabs.
Permission to break the witness, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
I've handed you one envelope. What do you recognize that to be?
It says it's a buccal swab of her left cheek and a buccal swab of Miss Gregg's right cheek.
And those are both of Carly Gregg, the defendant?
Yes, ma'am.
Did those appear to be altered in any way?
No, ma'am. Other than they were taken to the crime lab.
If you would you turn them over? Are your initials on those?
Yes, ma'am.
And what does that mean?
That I sealed it on that specific date.
Your Honor, we'd ask that these be marked as state's next exhibits.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, mark the left cheek as S47. And mark the right cheek as S48.
Investigator Cotton, excuse me, did you also close and seal evidence of swabs taken from the firearm used to kill Miss Smylie?
That was not me. I believe that was Investigator Burnell did that.
May I approach witness, Your Honor? That's all right. I'm handing you 2 envelopes. If you could take a look at those, both front and back. What are those 2 envelopes?
This one says it's a swab taken off of the trigger of the firearm, and this other one says it's a swab from the hammer of the revolver.
And did those both bear your initials as well?
Yes, ma'am.
indicating that you do know what those are?
Yes, ma'am.
And is that taken from the hammer and the trigger of the weapon used in this crime?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, we'd ask that those be marked as the state's next exhibit.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
S49 will be the swab of the hammer. S50 will be the swab of the trigger.
Investigator Cotton, we've heard from two other officers, a deputy and investigator, that were involved in this case, and so I certainly don't want to rehash what they've talked about. We've gotten, I think, through the point where in the investigation where the crime scene was cleaned up, or processed, I'm sorry, the victim was taken out of the home, both the living and the deceased victim. At some point, did you have the opportunity to observe an autopsy on Ashley Smylie?
Yes, ma'am. It was approximately a week later. I believe it was on March 26th at the Mississippi Crime Lab.
May I approach, Your Honor? I'm handing you what's previously been marked as 41 and 42 for ID. If you could take a look at those and tell me what those are.
These are both projectiles that were recovered from the body of Ashley Smylie, one of which was recovered from her brain and the other which was recovered from the back of her neck.
And were you present when the autopsy was performed and those projectiles were removed?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And did you also seal that evidence?
I believe the crime lab sealed that one due to them being the one that actually recovered the projectiles.
But you were present when they were recovered?
Yes, ma'am.
We'd ask that those be marked as an exhibit rather than ID at this time, Your Honor.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
They'll be admitted all purposes. Please hand them back to the court reporter. They mark 41 and 42 all purposes. All right, you may proceed.
Attendant witness, Your Honor.
Cross.
Investigator Cotton, who all did you witness, or who all did you, I guess, interview in this case?
One of the parties that was interviewed was the friend that was over at the residence at the time Mr. Smylie was shot.
And her initials would be the BW, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And then as well as the friend that was outside the residence that was located, whose initials are BG.
Okay.
I also spoke with parents of some of the other juveniles that Ms. Gregg had attempted to contact on the date that this incident occurred, as well as Mr. Smylie.
Okay. And when you I guess, you were at this, you originally were the investigator who got the, I guess, a little SD drive, with that SD card, would that be correct?
The one that he provided to us went with the initial garage footage.
Yes.
Is that one? Yes, sir.
Okay, so, and you were at the scene that night, when this takes place on the 19th?
Yes, sir. I went to the residence for a short period of time.
And you helped with the investigation, and you're the lead investigator?
Yes, sir. Investigator Burnell helped me with it.
Okay, and so you gathered all the evidence and information that you could on the 19th.
Investigator Burnell did. I wasn't there for the processing of the scene. I had left to go back to the office.
Okay. And then what did you do when you got back to the office?
We have a drying chamber up there that we can secure clothes and other evidence in there that may either be saturated in blood or just water in general. Miss Gregg's clothes, whenever she was booked in, were brought up there and placed in this drying chamber to dry out.
Now, you're the person, I guess, who's in charge of gathering all the evidence for this case. Would that be correct?
I assisted with it. I had other investigators assist me with it as well.
Okay, but you're sort of you're the main guy on this case, so everything sort of comes to you. Would that be correct?
Yes, sir. Eventually it would come back to me.
Okay. And so you see all the videos, you know everything that's out there concerning this case, right?
I would believe so, yes.
Okay. Now, I know at some point there's a video with I guess a Deputy Stack?
Oh, Shaq?
Shack, I'm sorry, Shack. Are you aware of that one?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And does Carly ask to see her mother on that video, doesn't she?
I don't recall.
Okay. Now, I guess you interviewed Heath, is that correct?
Yes, sir, at a later date, not on the date that the incident occurred.
Okay. When you interview Heath, and this is, I guess it's a couple days after, is that correct?
I think it was approximately a week and a half. It was the very beginning of April.
Okay. And he comes and sits down, and had you gotten the SD card at that time?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so, because I noticed it said that you and it was you, his attorney, and himself, and he had gotten an attorney based upon whatever happens with this SD card, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, you're asking him, sort of why this happens, or why this happened, because this was not normal for, somebody just walk up and shoot their mother, correct? Especially if there's not a sort of a history or something, correct?
I may have. I don't remember the specific question, but I may have an interview.
Okay. And it's at that time where, and Heath doesn't really know, correct?
Correct.
And so the next thing that happens is y'all start talking about, yes, she was in treatment and they had switched her medication. And I don't think he could tell you what it was, but you just had a general conversation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And so that was the first time you learned that there may be psychological issues in this case. Now, we had just seen, there was a video, and I think it's a video you've been questioned about before, and it was, I guess it's the video, it's the camera that was found, not the little SD card, but the camera that was found in the refrigerator. You know what we're talking about with that camera?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I think you've been questioned about it, and you said you can't tell what Miss Smylie, what room she's in, correct?
You talking about Miss Ashley Smylie?
Yes, Ashley Smylie. Yes. You do not know what room she's in.
No, so I can't say for certain which room she's in.
Yes. And you can't tell anything that she was carrying or not carrying or anything. You were never able to identify that.
It's not. It's kind of the distance. It's not really discernible what exactly it is. She just had stuff in her hands at some points.
And I think your testimony would be from before is that you didn't see them fighting or doing anything that was out of the ordinary before this incident happened, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I think you checked with did you check with her friends at school and everything to see if there was anything there that had caused problems?
I spoke with the BW and BG. I know BG had mentioned that he had told Miss Smylie prior to them leaving school that day that he had informed her of a phone that she wasn't supposed to have because, to my understanding, she was in trouble already and had her actual phone taken away, and had told her about what he called weed pens that she had been using, and he said that he had told Miss Smylie that prior to her leaving school and going home with Miss Gregg.
And I think he also had told you he didn't see anyone like Miss Smylie mad or anything like that when he left Miss Smylie, correct?
I believe so. Now,
I just a couple of questions. I was just wondering. Okay, BG he's a minor, correct? He's already testified.
Yes.
Okay, and you questioned him at the scene and also at the police station, or just at the scene?
No, sir, just at the scene.
Okay, and did you get his parents' permission to do that before you did it?
No, sir, he wasn't a suspect at the time, and his mother, right when I began speaking with him, actually walked up. I believe he had already called her.
Okay, at some point had y'all told him, and he had communicated to his mother that y'all were just taking him home?
Objection or cause for speculation.
Overruled as to what he told me.
Yeah. Did you tell BG that y'all were just going to take him home?
I do not recall. I don't remember saying that to him. I'm not sure if other deputies did.
May I beg the court's indulgence for a moment, Your Honor? And I just want to be clear, I think you've already, it's sort of going back to that camera. You had said, I think you've already said that you couldn't tell if Ashley Smylie had been cleaning out a drawer like in the other room or something like that. You had no idea what she was doing, correct?
No, sir. She just appeared to be going over to that side of the residence where Miss Gregg's room was and then coming out with items in her hand.
Okay, no further questions.
Redirect examination.
May I approach her?
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Gregg Cotton, I'm handing you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 36 and 37. Do you recognize those photographs?
Yes, ma'am.
Who's depicted in that photograph on the floor, deceased?
Ashley Smylie.
And whose room was that, did you determine during your course of your investigation?
It was Carly Gregg's room.
And in the course of your investigation, were there also other signs that the shooting had occurred in that bedroom?
Yes, ma'am. I believe there was some blood spatter on the television that was in the room that was mounted on the wall, as well as there was a defect in the wall where one of the projectiles had gone.
Was there any evidence that any crime had occurred in the guest bedroom?
No, ma'am, not that we found.
Based on your investigation, the murder of Ashley Smylie occurred in what bedroom?
In Miss Gregg's bedroom.
And who murdered her?
Miss Gregg.
And based off your investigation, who attempted to murder Heath Smylie?
Miss Gregg.
And based off your investigation, and we watched the video just a few moments ago, who's the last person that was alive in the house when the camera goes out?
Miss Gregg was.
Is it your understanding that she's the one that removed the camera?
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
This witness be finally excused by the state.
So did Sharif, Your Honor.
All right. You're free to stand down, but you must leave the courtroom and you must not discuss your testimony with anyone else, okay? Free to step down.
Where are you currently employed?
I'm employed at the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory in Pearl, Mississippi.
And you're our first witness from the crime lab today, the Forensics Laboratory. So could you explain for the ladies and gentlemen what you guys do over there?
We provide forensic examinations to 8 law enforcement agencies in the state of Mississippi.
And what is your position at the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory?
I'm a forensic scientist as well as the section chief of the trace evidence section, the supervisor.
And what exactly does a section chief of trace evidence do?
We do items of trace evidence, gunshot residue, hair fibers, paints, glass, fire debris. We have probably $1.5 million worth of analytical equipment, as well as I'm the supervisor of that section responsible for the technical aspects of the trace evidence section.
And how long have you been employed there with the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory?
I've been with the laboratory since January of '94, so a little over 30 years.
Do you have any previous experience testifying as a forensic scientist and with a subspecialty of trace evidence?
Yes, ma'am. I've testified probably north of 400 times in circuit court in Mississippi, circuit court in Louisiana, as well as federal court in the state of Mississippi. As a matter of fact, I've testified here on several occasions.
And if you could give the ladies and gentlemen just a kind of background on what education you have and kind of how you got to be in this role.
Yes, ma'am. I hold degrees in chemistry and forensic science from the University of Mississippi. I've attended numerous schools and seminars over the years. I've been to the FBI Academy in Quantico, several different classes. I've been to McCrone Research Institute in Chicago. I'm certified by the American Board of Criminalistics after passing the national certification test in 1998. So my certification is in comprehensive criminalistics. I'm also a member of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, the Southern Association of Forensic Scientists, and the American Society of Trace Evidence Examiners. And of course, our laboratory is an accredited laboratory. We're accredited by the organization called ANAB.
Your Honor, at this time we would move to have this witness tendered as an expert as a forensic scientist with a specialty in trace evidence.
Without objection, he'll be admitted as an expert witness in the field of forensic science with a specialty in trace evidence. You may proceed.
If you could explain to us exactly what trace evidence is.
Trace evidence deals with small items of evidence, trace amounts. We analyze such things as I previously stated, hairs, textile fibers, paints, glass, gunshot residue, and in addition to that, fire debris type evidence where we're looking at charred debris for ignitables. We do a lot of comparison work where we're comparing unknown samples to known samples, but probably our biggest caseload is gunshot residue examinations. We probably get about 400 or 500 of those cases in a year, and our second most caseload is going to be fire debris.
And what is gunshot residue?
Gunshot residue is produced when a weapon is discharged, and what will happen is you'll get gases escaping any opening in the weapon. We're specifically looking for primer residue, which comes from the primer cup. So when the firing pin strikes, and the weapon strikes the ammunition, the primer cup, it ignites those components. That ignites the gunpowder, which is what propels a projectile out the end of the barrel. You'll get these gases escaping any opening in the barrel. When it hits the cooler air outside the weapon, it'll condense into particles. These particles are microscopic in size. They contain lead, barium, and antimony, and they will have a spherical morphology.
And what type of testing, or can you describe for us how you test for gunshot residue?
We utilize what is called a scanning electron microscope with an energy dispersive X-ray analyzer. That's a fancy name for a large microscope that analyzes these tiny particles. Since they're about a micron in diameter, you have to have a pretty powerful instrument to look for these. The microscope actually visualizes the particles. The X-ray detector actually tells us the composition of those particles. And again, we're looking for lead, barium, and antimony particles. Those are what are produced from primer residue.
And I want to take just a step back. You mentioned earlier that the lab is accredited. Do you also undergo like performance testings on the machinery that you use?
We're accredited every 4 years, so every 4 years a team comes in and inspects all aspects of the organization, as well as we're proficiency tested every year. So every year we complete proficiency tests that are outside proficiency tests, and we to look for things like gunshot residue or the other disciplines.
And for people that are not familiar with those proficiency tests, is that like I would do my research or my testing, I would submit my report, and an outside agency would then review everything and make sure that that was proper?
It's sort of like that. What we do is the outside agency will produce the proficiency test. They have an expected outcome of those tests, and the report will be issued after the report is published on what that proficiency test is. So there is an expected answer.
back in,
this test.
and back in, excuse me for speaking of you, back in March of 2024 through currently, was your proficiency testing at the crime lab and you're specifically up to date?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I just completed a GSR proficiency test.
Mr. Whitehead, did you have the opportunity to work on Mississippi Crime Lab case number 24003-524?
I did.
And who was the suspect in that case?
The suspect was listed as being a Carly Greggs.
And the work and the testing that you did on that case, was that also reviewed by anyone else?
It was. All of our casework is reviewed by a second examiner, and that particular examiner in this case was Jacob Birchfield.
And did he agree with the results of your findings?
He did.
What evidence did you review or did you receive in order to do your testing?
I received a gunshot residue evidence collection kit labeled as coming from Carly Gregg.
Permission to approach witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I handed you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 43. Have you seen that item before?
I have. This is a gunshot residue evidence collection kit. I can identify it by the crime lab case number, submission number on the barcode that was placed there by an evidence tech when it was received into the laboratory. I can also identify it by the green evidence seal that I placed after the analysis was complete with my initials and date across that seal.
And being that that is still sealed, does that appear to be in the same or similar condition as when you closed it?
It does.
And for what purpose did you review that piece of evidence?
This item of evidence was analyzed for the presence of gunshot residue.
And did you perform that testing to see
I
if there
did.
was gunshot residue present? Did you prepare a report with your findings in that case?
Yes, ma'am.
Permission to approach witness, Your Honor? Is that an accurate copy of your report?
Yes, ma'am. This is a copy of the certified report that I issued in this particular case.
And that contains your findings?
It does.
And it bears your signature?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, we'd ask that this be marked as the state's next exhibit.
Any objection?
No objection.
Admitted S51 for all purposes.
If you would, Mr. Whitehead, if you could explain, I know you've talked about what gunshot residue is and that you tested that particular kit. If you could just walk us through the testing on this particular item and what your findings were.
Yes, ma'am. This particular kit contained 2 adhesive tape lifts labeled right hand and left hand. The adhesive tape lifts, the idea is if there's any residue on the surface of a person's hands, it will be picked up by the adhesive tape lift. Those samples were then placed into the scanning electron microscope and analyzed for the presence of gunshot residue, and I reported out the results of that analysis.
And what were the results in this case?
Particles of gunshot residue were positively identified on the right hand, labeled as coming from Carly Greggs, and the left hand, labeled as coming from Carly Greggs.
And based on your training and experience, is the results rendered reliable?
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Question, please, witness.
All right, may this witness be finally excused by the state?
Yes, sir.
By the defense.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, you're free to go, Ms. Morris.
I'm employed at the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory in Pearl, Mississippi.
Nathan, what do you do there at the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory?
So I'm a forensic biologist specializing in DNA analysis.
And does that require any type of specialized training?
Training that I have is from the forensics laboratory.
What about your educational background? Could you tell us what that is?
Sure. I have a bachelor's in biology with a minor in chemistry from the University of Southern Mississippi.
And how long have you been employed? I'm sorry, you might have already said that. How long have you been employed with the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory?
17 years next month.
And have you been doing DNA evidence and testing that entire time?
Yes, I have.
Do you have any prior experience testifying as a forensic scientist specializing in DNA evidence?
Yes, I do.
How many times would you estimate that you've been certified as an expert?
Approximately 27.
Your Honor, at this point, we would tender the expert to this witness as an expert in forensic science and DNA analysis.
Any objection? All right, he'll be admitted without objection as an expert, as a forensic scientist, as an expert in the area of forensic science, particularly DNA analysis. You may proceed.
Mr. Hawley, if you could tell us, for those of us that are not science people, what DNA is.
Sure. So DNA first stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. and it's a molecule that's found within the cells of the human body. And what DNA does is it tells the body how to build cells and also how to function and work those cells properly. A person gets their DNA half from their mom and half from their dad, and it's that combination of those two separate DNAs that gives everybody, except for identical twins, a unique DNA profile.
And when you do DNA testing, what are we talking about? What's done with our DNA?
Sure. So with the DNA testing, I'm looking at certain locations on that DNA molecule, and there are forensics tests that can determine what a person's DNA looks like at those locations. And I basically take items of evidence and I do the DNA process on those, and then I take reference samples or known samples, and then I compare those two DNA profiles to determine whether or not that person's DNA is there.
And a known sample would be like if a swab was taken from my mouth, we would know that that was my sample. Is that
Right, right. It's a known or reference.
And then an unknown sample would be something that you would collect or that law enforcement would collect on a piece of evidence and send that to you.
That's correct.
We just heard from Mr. Whitehead that the entire forensics laboratory, of course, is accredited. Is the DNA section of the laboratory also, does that fall under the accreditation?
Yes, it does.
And do you follow proper protocol there?
Yes, we do.
Have you personally provided or undergone any proficiency testing?
Yes.
If you could explain that to ladies and gentlemen.
For DNA, we're proficiency tested twice a year, and it's from an outside company. And basically, it is for us to demonstrate that we are capable to do the DNA process or our job. And so there's a correct answer for that, and they double check us on that.
And your proficiency is up to date?
Yes.
Did you have the opportunity to work on a case? It's Mississippi Forensics Laboratory case number 24-003524.
Your Honor, may I refer to that? Yes, I did.
Mayor Perks, in performing that work, did you actually did you render a report?
Yes, I did.
Mayor Perks Wittenshire?
Your Honor, we're not going to have an objection to the document.
Now, go ahead and ask that you mark designated statements exhibit.
Without objection, it'll be marked S52.
Mr. Holly, before you can do any testing there at the crime lab, you have to receive certain pieces of evidence. Is that right?
That's correct.
Mayor Perks Wittenshire? I'll put these all out in front of you. I'm handing you what's previously been marked as Exhibit 47, 48, 49, and 50. If you could, starting with number 47, tell me what that is and how you know what that is.
So this is it is a buccal swab of Carly Gregg's left cheek, and I can identify it from the crime lab barcode, which has the case number and submission number on it.
And did you, is there also a buccal swab of her right cheek?
Yes,
And did you rely on that evidence in your testing in this case?
I did.
I also handed you another item, looks like 2 additional swabs. Could you tell us what those were from?
So one is a swab from a hammer of a Taurus revolver, and once again I can identify it by the crime lab barcode that has a case number, submission number, as well as the evidence date with my date and initial on it. And then the other one is a swab taken off of a trigger of the firearm.
In performing DNA testing, do you actually have to, well, can you describe for us, like you take an extract from something?
Yes. So the DNA process starts with extraction. And what I'm doing during the extraction is I'm actually removing the cells off of whatever substrate they're on, whether it's a swab or a cutting. And I'm lysing open that cell and getting rid of all the other cellular components except for the DNA. So the only thing that I'm left with is that isolated DNA.
Did you do that in this particular case?
Yes, I did.
Permission to proceed.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you recognize the item that I just handed you?
Yes.
And what are those?
So these would be the DNA extracts from my extractions on the items of evidence.
And there's 4 total, but I just want to talk about, is there one for the swab from the trigger and then one from the swab of the hammer of a firearm?
Yes, there are.
Your Honor, we'd ask that that be marked as state's next exhibit.
Any objection? No objection. All right, we'll do hand the trigger extract to the court order. That'll be S53. Are both extracts in the same envelope?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and just mark the one envelope S53. Is there a second envelope?
I can take the other side, Your Honor.
Okay.
Mr. Hawley, the report that you prepared, did someone else review that work that you had done?
Yes, they did.
And did they agree with your findings?
Yes, they did.
And if you could tell us about the 2 items, I think I misspoke earlier in this case when I said that there was a DNA match on the hammer. Could you tell us what your findings were with regards to the hammer, the swab from the hammer on the Taurus gun?
Due to an insufficient amount of genetic information, no comparable results were obtained for the swab from hammer.
What about for the trigger of the Taurus firearm?
The DNA test results for the swab from trigger produced a partial profile which is consistent with the reference sample of the suspect. Therefore, Gregg is not excluded as a possible DNA donor to this sample. Actually, Smylie is excluded as a possible DNA donor to this sample.
So explain that, because when I first read one of these reports, I was like, what does that mean, not excluded? In layman's term, I'd say that's them. But in scientific terms, you have to say that they can't be ruled out, right?
Right. So in this case, the DNA that is there, it does match to Gregg's DNA.
Is there a quantification? Do you put a certain number, like 1 in so many people, that DNA belongs to?
So anytime there is a match made, we do give a status statement. And I can read that one and then explain it to you. For the 8 markers compared, the genetic profile for the DNA donor of the swab from trigger occurs with a frequency of approximately 1 in greater than 10 billion random unrelated persons of the Caucasian, African American, and the Hispanic population. And so that stat is supposed to give weight to how common or how rare you would expect that profile. And in this case, it would be a rare profile.
And as I understand it, the 1 in 10 billion is actually just the forensic laboratory's cutoff. You got to stop it at a certain point.
That's right. Once the numbers get so big, it's hard to understand. We usually cap it at above the world population, which is, last time I checked, around 8 billion. So we cap it at 10 billion.
And to be clear, your report excludes Ashley Smylie as a DNA donor on the trigger of the gun.
That's correct.
Court's indulgence. No further questions, Brian.
Cross-examination.
No questions.
May this witness be finally released by the state?
Yes, sir.
By the defense?
Yes, sir.
You're free to go. Please leave your exhibits up there.
And where are you employed?
I'm employed with the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory, located in Pearl.
And what are your duties there? Or sorry, what is your position there at the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory?
I'm the section chief over the firearm and tool mark unit.
And what are your duties as the section chief of the firearms and tool mark division?
As the section chief, I oversee the administrative and personnel matters within our division, but also act as a forensic scientist specializing in firearm and tool mark identification, which allows me to compare bullets, cartridge cases, or other ammunition components to see if they were fired in a particular firearm.
And how long have you been employed with the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory?
Since November of 2008.
Do you have any previous experience as a forensic scientist specializing in firearms and tool mark examination?
I was trained with the Indiana State Police beginning in 2005.
Would you give the jury your educational background?
Yes. I earned a Bachelor of Science in Forensic Science from Eastern Kentucky University.
And have you completed any specialized training in forensic science and firearms and tool marks?
Yes. When employed with the Indiana State Police, I completed a 2-year apprenticeship-style training program, which included lots of literature references, touring of various firearm and ammunition manufacturing facilities, supervised casework, mock and written exams, and then I continue to travel annually to different seminars and to maintain certification.
And have you previously been accepted as an expert witness as a forensic scientist in firearms and tool marks?
I have.
How many times would you estimate that?
Near 100 at this point.
Your Honor, at this time we'd move to have this witness tendered as an expert in forensic science in firearms and tool marks.
No objection.
Without objection, shall be admitted as an expert in the area of firearms and tool marks. Firearms and tool mark identification. You can proceed.
Ms. McIntyre, if you could kind of talk to us about what ballistics are.
The field of firearms examination has as its main concern to determine if a bullet or cartridge case was fired in a particular firearm. We're able to do that through class and individual characteristics. More specifically, when a gun is manufactured, some features of that firearm are determined by that manufacturer. Those are considered class characteristics. The caliber, the way that the firearm is rifled, so the number of lands and grooves that are put inside that barrel, those are put there to help impart spin on the bullet, but those are determined by that manufacturer. Incidental to that manufacturing process, individual marks are left behind. So those are things that happen as a result of the machining processes or use and abuse over time that cannot be determined by the manufacturer. And those marks are unique to a particular firearm. I'm looking for both those class and individual marks on a microscope when I'm comparing these items. So I'm looking at a comparison microscope, which is just two regular stereo microscopes joined by an optical bridge, so I can see two different items through one field of view. So in a case matter, we'll be looking for those class and individual marks on unknown items versus items I know were test fired from a particular firearm.
When you talk about test firing, where do you get the items that you use to conduct test firing?
When a firearm is submitted to the laboratory, I will generate those knowns. So I'm making test fires. I'm getting reference ammunition that we have at the laboratory that has been purchased, and I'm firing it in the gun that has been submitted for testing. I do that in a water tank. That's literally just a 12-foot deep tank of water. That allows me to discharge the firearm. Those individual marks are placed on it, and they're not affected at all by the water, so I can retrieve it to have intact knowns to compare to my unknowns.
And I want to take a step back. We spoke with two experts previously about proficiency testing, and I want to make sure that you two, Ms. McIntyre, have performed and essentially passed your proficiency testing.
Yes, Firearms Unit also completes annual proficiency testing, which I have taken and passed this year.
Did you have the opportunity to be involved in crime lab number 24-003524?
I did.
And who was the suspect in that case?
Suspect is listed as a Gregg, spelled C-A-R-L-Y, last name G-R-E-G-G.
And the testing that you performed, was that reviewed by anyone there at the Mississippi Forensics Laboratory?
Yes, it was.
And did they agree with your results?
They did.
In preparation, or at the conclusion of your testing, did you prepare a report with your findings?
I did.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Ms. McIntyre, what I've handed you, does that appear to be a true and accurate copy of the report that you prepared in this particular case?
Yes, it does.
You mentioned that you used test firing ammo. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? I'm sorry, may I have that moved as State's next exhibit before I move on?
Any objections to the report?
Yeah. Objection. The report will be admitted as S-53 without objection.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm handing you what's been marked, or has not been marked. Could you tell me what that is, please?
Yes, for the record, I've been handed a test fire envelope that bears crime laboratory number 24-003524. I recognize this envelope as it bears the crime laboratory barcode with the case number and submission number. My initials are placed upon it when I created it, as well as a tape seal of my date and initials when I completed my examination of these items.
And does that appear to be in a unaltered form since you sealed that envelope?
Yes, the seals are still intact.
Your Honor, we'd ask that that be marked as State's next exhibit.
Any objection? No objection, Your Honor. Admitted as 55.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I've handed you two items that have been previously marked as S1, S41 and S42. Do you recognize both of those items as well?
I do.
And what are those?
State's Exhibit 41 is Crime Laboratory Submission 5 in the above-mentioned case. Now, this is a sealed plastic bag containing a manila envelope labeled Bullet from Brain. State's Exhibit 42 is Crime Laboratory Submission 4. I recognize my markings on this item as well. It is a sealed plastic bag containing a manila envelope labeled Bullet from Back of Neck.
One other item, Your Honor. I'm also also handing you what's previously been marked as S40. You want to take a look at that and tell me if you can identify that.
State's Exhibit 40 is Crime Laboratory Submission 6. Recognize the markings on the box here. This particular box contains one Taurus revolver. I also recognize my inscription and the serial number that are on this revolver within the box.
Ms. McIntyre, we talked about the bullet removed from Ashley Smiley's neck. The projectile. The one removed from her brain, the .357 Taurus, and then the test fires that you used. Was there any other evidence that you relied upon in rendering your opinions in this particular case?
No, ma'am.
And were you able to, can you walk us through what testing specifically was done on these items?
Yes, ma'am. When I received the firearm, I worked up a general worksheet documenting those class characteristics that we spoke about. I then used the reference ammunition we discussed, test fired this particular firearm into the water tank, thus generating the test fires here in State's Exhibit 55. I then took the test fires in State's Exhibit 55 and compared those on a comparison microscope to both the projectile in State's Exhibit 41 and the projectile in State's Exhibit 42 to arrive at my conclusions about whether or not they originated from State's Exhibit 40.
And what was your conclusion?
The projectiles in State's Exhibit 41 and 42 were fired in the gun in State's Exhibit 40.
And based on your training and experience, do you consider the results that you did in this particular case to be reliable?
Yes, ma'am.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Cross-examination. No question. May the witness be excused by the state?
Yes, sir.
By the defense? You're free to go.
Yes.